Hi friends, how are you today? Good? Okay. My name is BaileySarian and today is Monday, which means it's Murder, Mystery, and Makeup Monday. If you're new here, hi, my name is BaileySarian, and on Mondays I like to sit down and talk about a true crime story that's been heavy on my noggin, and I do my makeup at the same time. If you're interested in true crime and you like makeup, I would say subscribe because I'm here for you on Mondays. Before we get into today's story, we do have a word from our sponsor, PDS Debt. Now debt, listen, it doesn't break in. It just sneaks in with a missed payment. Then you get a second notice, a bill you push to the next paycheck, or a card you swipe when you know you shouldn't. I mean, that's how debt works. And it creeps up on you. And it adds up fast. Suddenly your account gets locked. I don't know about you, but one time, my wages got garnished. Yeah, that can happen. And then it feels like a freaking nightmare with no end in sight. And that's why I'm here to tell you about PDS Debt. PDS Debt has already helped hundreds of thousands of people escape debt from credit cards, personal loans, collections, or medical bills. PDS works with you to actually understand your unique situation and then craft a personalized plan designed for you, not just some one size fits all do this kind of formula. Now, their mission is to help you save more so you can pay off your debt faster and start putting your money back in your pocket. And I know this isn't the kind of thing that you just trust to anyone. So, why does PDS stand out? Well, they were rated with an A+ by the Better Business Bureau, for starters. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google, and PDS holds a 5-star rating on Trustpilot. Basically, PDS has a proven track record of helping people finally get out of debt, and people love them for it. And then, of course, the best part, there's no minimum credit score required. So you can start getting your debt in control today. And right now, you're 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/Bailey. That's pdsdebt.com/Bailey. pdsdebt.com/Bailey. A big thank you to PDS Debt for partnering with me on today's episode and for viewers like you, because without you, I wouldn't be here. And now, let's get into today's story. So in a quiet, little Michigan mining town, one woman's messy love life, honestly, it's more like a love square than a triangle. It went from small town gossip to national headlines. What started as an attempt to save a crumbling marriage actually spiraled into one man vanishing without a trace, another one overdosing, and a third dragged into a scandal that he could not escape. Today, we are talking about the disturbing case of Kelly Cochran. Kelly Cochran. She's from Michigan, though, but still. But here's the question. You don't know with this woman, okay? Was Kelly, honestly, low-key a serial killer? Was she just a mastermind who was pulling the strings? Or was she just a simple woman who let her obsessions destroy everything around her? Those are the questions that you will probably be left with. Kelly! If you're interested to know what I'm using, I'll list it down below, by the way. Thank you. Okay. So our story, it starts off in Iron River, Michigan. It's a small town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And around this time, it was said that there were 3,000 people living there. Maybe there's more now. Maybe there's less. But, it was small. And they had one stoplight. Now, if you look at pictures and stuff, this area is filled with tons and tons of trees. It honestly is kind of spooky, okay? And then the name is kind of aggressive. It's Iron River. But I guess they got their name from the local mining company. So that's fine. It's here where 53-year-old Air Force veteran Chris Regan was making a life for himself. He like grew up in Detroit. He later served in the Air Force, and then he eventually came to Iron River to be closer to an old flame. Her name was Terry O'Donnell. So he moves and all that, and he finds work at like a local manufacturing company where no one had anything bad to say about him. He sounded like a great guy. Like, it was said that he was reliable, a great team leader, and just like fun to be around. So it was a little odd when Chris didn't show up for work on October 14th, 2014. Now, he was not the type to like call out, let alone be a no-call, no-show. So it was weird. Then he didn't show up to work for like 2 more days. Now, again, this was like very concerning because it was completely out of character for him. Now, his coworkers went to his boss and mentioned that Chris had mentioned to them like that he had gotten a new job and he was planning on moving. So they were thinking, well, maybe he just kind of like up and left, like, okay. So it was concerning, but okay. But after 3 days of like no call, no show, at work, this led him to being terminated from the workplace. So this was like the first kind of sign of, something ain't right. Now, Chris and Terry had broken up by this point, but they were still like close friends and they would like text all the time. So she's texting him and calling him. And after, 10 days straight of texting and calling Chris with no response, Terry got worried. She's like, what the hell is going on? Like, again, this is not like him. So she went to police. So Terry ends up taking police to Chris's apartment and she lets them in because she has like a key, So she lets them in, and when they get inside, they see that the place is like a hot mess. In the apartment, there was just like boxes, packing tape, and crap everywhere. Now, Terry told police that Chris, he had accepted like a new job in Asheville, North Carolina. He was moving there to be like closer to his son, and he was packing and getting ready to move, but like normally he was a very clean guy and organized. So this was just like unusual. So they're looking around the apartment and they're finding all sorts of stuff. One of the documents they find was like the actual offer letter for his new job. And it wasn't signed and it wasn't mailed back to the company yet. So it was like, Terry's like, well, he accepted the job. Like, why wouldn't he sign and mail it off yet? Like, that's weird. Then they see his personal calendar. And they see that Chris had written he was going to resign from his current position on October 14th. And his last day of work was written down on October 23rd. So they're like, okay, so he had plans to like show up for work. They also noticed that his car wasn't there, his cell phone wasn't there, and the apartment window was open. Honestly, to police, it seemed like Chris had just like gotten up and like left the apartment really quick with the intention of coming right back. So a few days go by and there's still like no sign of Chris. So Terry, she's like driving around, and when she's driving around, she sees Chris's car at the local park and ride. It's like a carpooling parking lot, So she sees his car and she contacts police. So they come out to have a look, So Terry is telling police that like Chris would never leave his car like that for like a few days. His car was like his baby. So they look inside and they have a little flashlight. So they look inside and they see his knee brace. And Terry tells them like he always wore his knee brace. So that was concerning. Then when they get inside the car, they find a Post-it note on the passenger seat. And on the Post-it note, it had like step-by-step directions written on it to someone's house. So police, they start looking into Chris a little bit more, trying to figure out what's going on here. And they learn that Chris, he had relationships with a few different women. He was a likable guy, okay? He had options. But I was watching an interview with Terry, and she was like, yeah, this was new news to me. I thought we were exclusive. Either way, police end up questioning the other women, but they, had no helpful information. So this is when police were led to Kelly Cochran. You see that Post-it note that was found in the car? it had directions on them. And this led police to the Cochran home. So they go to the house, police knock on the door, knock, knock, and a guy named Jason answers. And police are like, hi, does Kelly live here? Is she here? And Jason responds like, no, she's not here. But then a few seconds later, Kelly comes like from behind him and she comes to the door. I was watching an interview with like the police who went to the house the first time, and they said it's actually very normal when they go to someone's house and they ask for a specific person, for whoever's at the door usually tells them, no, they're not here. They said that happens every time. So it was kind of like, it was normal. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, not the point though. So Kelly comes to the door and they're like, can we ask you some questions? And she's like, sure, So Kelly tells them Jason is her husband, and police are like, she's coming across very cool and calm. And they kind of look at Jason and he just appeared very nervous, quiet, uneasy. I guess his eyes were kind of like going back and forth, like, they're like, okay, noted. So they ask Kelly, like, hey, do you know Chris Regan? And she tells them, she did. They were coworkers, but she hadn't seen him for a while. Police ask, like, hey, do you know why Chris's car was at the park and ride? And it was noted. Her response was kind of weird because she said, like, what? I don't know. Like, he loved that car. And police thought this was odd because she was using past tense. They were like, he loved that car? So they had their suspicions that something was up, but they had nothing to base that on yet. They were like, these two are weird. The Iron River Police Department, they were, pretty small and they needed backup. So they called the Michigan State Police for help. And that's when they brought in Jason and Kelly. They brought them in for questioning because of that Post-it note that was found in Chris's car. I mean, it led them straight to the Cochran house. So it's like, this could have been the very last place Chris went before he disappeared, right? So they're like, bring them in. So they first interviewed Jason. Right off the bat, he starts the interview by telling police that he hasn't been doing well. He was institutionalized like a month ago. He has intense anxiety and he was seeing a therapist. Then he went on to say, like, he had lost a close friend recently. And on top of all of that, his marriage was falling apart. And it was like, wow, what a way to start. He just like laid it all out there. So they asked him if Kelly was having an affair and like, did he know about it? And Jason, he seemed pretty bothered by this question, but he went on to say that he knew about the affair and he just kind of like accepted it. And that if Kelly really wanted to be with someone else and like not him, then he would let her go. But you could tell he was just very upset, emotional. When Kelly was brought in, police noticed, once again, she was very like calm, cool. She was very in control of her body language. It was just different. But right off the bat, Kelly starts talking about, her husband, Jason, and how they had an open marriage. She mentioned that like she and Chris were having a relationship, but Jason knew all about it and he was totally okay with it. So Kelly tells police the last time that she saw Chris was between October 12th and the 15th at his apartment. And like that was all she knew. The chief of police for Iron River, her name is Laura Frizzo. She believed there was much more going on, okay? She was like, they are involved somehow, and she was determined to figure it out. Side note, but the chief of police, Laura Frizzo, she's a little badass. Like, she's the first female police chief in Iron River, so she's an icon. Plus, she's got the blowout, she's got the lash, and she's determined. I loved it. I loved watching her. I was like, you go, girl. So she starts looking into Kelly Cochran a little more. She's like, something ain't right here. So she's looking into Kelly and she finds out that Kelly was not only married to Jason, but she was also dating Chris and she was dating another coworker named Erickson. I was like, damn, she is busy. So police are like, okay, maybe Eric was jealous of Chris and he's the one responsible. So they bring in Eric for questioning, and Eric tells them, like, yeah, me and Kelly, we were hooking up or whatever, but that she had mentioned to him that she and Jason, they were separated and they were just like living in the same house. That was it. They were not together. So police, they look through Eric's phone. He like willingly gives it over. He's like, yes, you could take it. And they see text messages between him and Kelly. And it was the text messages, it seemed like Eric was getting irritated with Kelly because she was blowing him off and she was not like responding to his text messages. So he's kind of like sending these angry texts. And these texts, they were sent a week before Chris went missing. Eric told police that there was this one night when him and Kelly were hanging out at the lake. They were having some beers and her phone kept going off. Like it was ringing back to back to back to back. So finally he asked her, like, who's calling you? And she tells him, like, oh, it's Chris. So again, police are like, maybe Eric was jealous and he wanted Chris out of the picture. But Eric swore up and down, he had nothing to do with this and he had an alibi. So they asked him to take a polygraph test, which he ended up passing, and he was cleared. So this brought police back to Jason and Kelly. So they're thinking, okay, it has to be Jason. It has to be Jason because, his wife is having an affair. He's probably jealous. He obviously isn't doing well, So they talk to Jason again. I'm very handsy today. So they talk to Jason again. And he tells police that, again, like the marriage hadn't been going well and that Kelly was living like she was a single woman. So they end up going through Jason's text messages and see that clearly he was bothered by her relationships. Jason had sent Kelly text messages saying, I cannot take it. You promised me you would stop. Was that a lie also? So investigators are like, what made you send these text messages? And he was like, well, there was this one day where I went on a walk and just so happened to be like outside of Chris's apartment where I saw Kelly's truck park outside. So I was bothered by that and I sent her these texts. So after that, he sent her more text messages where he was asking her like not to go back to the apartment and reminding her that she was a married woman. So again, this is kind of like solidifying to police, okay, Jason, it's gotta be Jason, because he's kind of giving the, that's stalking behavior. Like he's following her around, he's getting mad, Jason had mentioned that he was admitted to a mental hospital because he wasn't doing well. So police did the math and they realized that he was admitted just 2 days after Chris went missing. Now, what are the odds of that, huh? With all this in mind, they're like, it's Jason. It's gotta be Jason. Now, Jason and Kelly, oh my God, sorry. I just had like a flashback moment. Do you remember the movie? It was like From Justin to Kelly or something like that. I saw it in theaters for some reason. It was after American Idol came out. I know his name's Jason, it's not Justin, but it was just, I had a little, that's so Raven moment. I think that movie bombed. What happened to that guy? Okay, so Jason and Kelly, they went way back. Growing up in the 80s, they were next door neighbors and they knew each other all their lives. After graduating high school, the two of them started dating and then eventually they got married. Now, according to Kelly in like a later interview, she said she felt like she was doing the right thing. Like, going to college, getting married, getting the house, etc. And she also said, like, in the beginning, marriage was cool, but after some time went on, it got boring to her. And she was like, dude, all I do is work. Yeah. You grow up and you realize that's it. All I do is work. Anyway, she was like, yeah, it's boring. But people who knew them said that they were total opposites. Jason was kind of like a little shy boy, more reserved. He kept to himself, where Kelly was like the outgoing one. She was the life of the party. She was more talkative. And according to Jason's family, it was definitely Kelly who wore the pants in the relationship. Months are going by, but police have like no solid evidence, to link them to Chris's disappearance. But they're waiting for an approval to get like a search warrant for the Cochran home. But again, like Iron River is a small town, so the fact that someone like just vanished was a very rare occurrence. And like the locals, they wanted to help. So a local private investigator team, they step up and decide to like, hey, how can we help? So things, they're moving slow, but in March of 2015, which is like 5 months later, Chief Frizzo, she finally gets approval to perform the search warrant at the Cochran home. So she's talking to the private investigators about this, and they decide to go with. They're going to go with her, okay? When the police and the private investigators show up to the home, they said like their first impression was that the home was quite creepy, okay? So, the first thing they do when they enter, they ask Jason and Kelly, are there any weapons in the house? They're like, oh, yeah. And they start naming where all the weapons are, okay? Now, normally, people have like a gun here or guns, whatever. They had tons of weapons in the house. They had tons of knives, swords, crossbows, guns, in literally every corner of this freaking house. And I was looking at pictures of it, and it's a lot of like medieval looking weapons and swords, battle axes, daggers. And it seemed like Jason was a collector, but it was a lot. It was like, what do you need that battle axe for? What are you doing with that? It was a lot. They had a lot, which isn't illegal. Well, is it? Whatever. Okay, so they're like, okay, there's a lot. So police are looking around, and they see like, one of the doors has like a full-on punch hole through it. Plus the front door itself was cracked and damaged. So they decide to call in the crime lab people to come out and like document the scene, collect any evidence, take photos, do all that stuff. So while police are waiting for the crime lab people to show up, the two private investigators that came with them, they're standing in the living room, and they're just kind of like looking around. They don't want to touch anything and like potentially contaminate the scene. So they're kind of like sitting there waiting, and they look up at the ceiling, and they notice that the ceiling tiles were newly painted. Fresh paint, But they're looking, and they could see like little spots that look like blood spatter underneath the new paint. And all this was caught on police footage. So you see them like looking around, and they're like, what's that? So they asked Kelly about this, and Kelly said that they were doing some like recent remodeling and painted the ceiling tiles. But if you look at the interior of their home, you're like, remodeling where? Okay, because girl, where? Sure, okay. So eventually the crime lab people, they show up, and they end up doing like luminol tests on the ceiling spots. Now, luminol will detect blood. So they do the test, and it comes back positive for blood. So to police, they're like, okay, it looks like some kind of an attack happened at the door, and then the blood had like spread out onto the ceiling. So they collect their samples and a bunch of evidence, and Chief Frizzo was feeling like, this is it. Like, this is it. We got it. Once we get confirmation on that blood, that's it. She's feeling good. Literally the next morning, Chief Frizzo gets a phone call from the Cochran's neighbors. Now, they were calling to let her know that Kelly and Jason loaded up their truck and took off. Like they were skipping town. She's like, oh shit, no. So the neighbors, they were brought in for questioning, and they had mentioned that around the time of Chris's disappearance, they noticed that the Cochrans started renovating their house but they weren't like working during the day. They were only working at night, okay, for multiple nights. The neighbors said that they could hear them like sanding and using a reciprocating saw. I had to look that one up. But again, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and they did this for like a handful of days. This is when Chief Frizzo, she knew deep down, she's like, oh shit, they most likely like were cutting Chris up. But again, like she had no hard proof. She had no hard proof yet, just allegations. Then another neighbor told police that like they were outside in their front yard, like minding their own business, when they smelled something funky, like real funky. And they're like looking, and they noticed that Jason and Kelly, they were burning something. So the neighbors like out front kind of like looking in their direction, and I guess Kelly came like running out into the front, and the neighbor asked her like, what the hell are you burning? And she told him like, oh, we're just like burning some brush. It's not, no big deal. But according to the neighbor, he was like, I have lived here all of my life, and I have never smelled anything that awful before. Like, it was bad. Now to you and I, we're like, what's she burning? What are they burning? A body? Police. They go out and they search like the Cochran yard. And they notice that like in the yard, there's a fire pit shaped like a barrel sunk into the ground, but the barrel itself was missing. So they ended up like sifting through the dirt and the ashes, and investigators, they uncovered a saw blade along with small scraps of denim, rivets from like your jeans, buttons, and a zipper. What? Yes. But like, again, it's like, it's not that DNA proof. It's just like, you know what I'm saying? So there wasn't anything they could do with this. They all know what the fuck is going on, but they can't make an arrest just based off of this. So during their search, when they searched the home, they also found journals and like short stories that Jason had written. And there were a few that stood out, but there was one story titled Quack's Revenge, and I guess it was an odd one. So Quack, yeah, main character, Quack, went on a killing spree in this story, and he wanted to get revenge on a guy whose description almost matched Chris's to a T. Okay, it was a bizarre story, and it was dark, and it was highly suspicious, but not illegal. So, Quack, we're on to you. Well, lab results come back to Chief Frizzo about the blood samples found on the ceiling tiles. Now, she's all excited about this because this, again, is going to be like, this is it. But sadly, the samples were bad. Yeah, they came back with nothing, like no clear DNA. Nothing. Now, this turned out to be like one of the biggest disappointments because, like, again, this was it. So I was like, damn, like, now what do we do? You know, because Jason and Kelly had skipped town. Well, surprise, surprise. You know those private investigators? Well, they came in very handy because while they were performing the search warrant, one of them, the PIs, snuck away and quietly like put a tracking device on the Cochran's truck, which is legal for private investigators to do in the state of Michigan. And I was like, oh, good to know. So according to the private investigators, the reason they put the tracking device like on their truck was because they thought at some point the couple, they were going to drive to the location of wherever they dumped the body. So, you know, they stuck that little device under the truck low key without like anyone knowing. So the private investigators, they go tell Chief Frizzo about the GPS because they were following them. And they share that Jason and Kelly, they drove all the way down to Hobart, Indiana, and were staying at Kelly's parents' house. So Chief Frizzo, she contacts the local police department in Indiana, and she tells them everything. She tells them what's going on. just fills them in, okay? And she's like, listen, I really want DNA samples from Jason and Kelly. So luckily, this police department is like, oh, okay, okay, we'll get that for you. So once again, the police, they locate Jason in Hobart, and they bring him into the department saying like, hey, we have a warrant to get your DNA. So it was said when they picked him up, he was like, obviously very nervous. He didn't say a single word the entire time. And he was like shaking and sweating and just acting odd. So Hobart police bring him into the station, and then they put him in like in an interrogation room. So Jason is just sitting there, and then in walks Chief Frizzo. Listen, she drove over 6 hours from Iron River down to Hobart just to further talk to Jason and get his DNA. Now, this little moment was caught on the security cameras or whatever. But when she walked in, like, Jason just he kind of goes red in the face, but he just looks completely shocked. He's like, what the fuck? You know, just to see her walk in. Now, Chief Frizzo said that she was really hoping to make him feel like a victim in hopes that, like, he would kind of confess. So she was like, hey, remember when your wife was cheating on you? And you, like, just wanted her to act like your wife? Remember? That was kind of crazy, huh? And you could tell Jason was, like, uncomfortable and bothered. But immediately he asked for a lawyer. So she's like, damn. So she backs off, but she gets her DNA sample. So during this time, Kelly was calling his phone nonstop. She was calling. You know, I think she's worried. So then Kelly comes into the station. And Chief Frizzo said, like, she could tell Kelly was annoyed. Like, damn, this woman will not leave me alone, you know? Like, oh, God. Chief Frizzo, she sits down and she kind of fibs a bit. She tells Kelly that Jason had been there for a while and that he told her some stuff. She's like, yeah, he told me some stuff. Hoping to create, you know, some kind of distrust between the couple. But Kelly, she immediately asked for a lawyer. And Chief Frizzo was like, God damn it. So she backs off, but she's able to get her DNA sample. So things kind of hit a standstill. That is, until the night of February 20th, 2016. So a 911 call comes through, and it's Kelly. And she's calling to report that her husband, Jason, was barely breathing. She said his face was turning blue and like she needed an ambulance. So when paramedics arrived to, you know, the house, Kelly was a mess, as you would imagine. But they felt like it was a little over the top. Plus, Kelly was actually getting in the way of the paramedics getting to Jason and like helping him. She was kind of like, like just in the way. And they're like, get out of the way. I guess it got so bad that like they had to remove her from the room. Now, sadly, there was nothing they could do, and Jason was pronounced dead from what looked like a heroin overdose. Poor quack quack. So, after Jason had died, Kelly reached out to like one of his good friends. His name's Walt. And she lets him know like, hey, Jason passed away from an overdose. Now, this did not feel right to Walt. Walt knew like Jason never, ever touched hard drugs. So there was no way like that he died of an overdose. So Walt, he contacts the FBI, which I know feels like a jump, but he said, according to Walt, he said he found the missing person flyer with Chris Regan's info on it. So he remembered that Jason told him that he and Kelly had gotten into some trouble back in Michigan over a missing guy. And Walt's like, okay, well now Jason is dead. So he was thinking that Jason's death was connected somehow. So that's why he contacted the FBI to like pass on this information. So after Walt's tip came in, the FBI reached out to Hobart detective Jeremy Ogden. Now, this detective, he had a reputation, like not just as a great investigator, but as like an even better interrogator. First, he started digging into Jason's death, and then Kelly's background, and then finally Chris Regan's disappearance. So he's like connecting all the pieces, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, there's something here. So that's when he ends up connecting with Iron River Police Chief Laura Frizzo. Now, she was thrilled to get this phone call, just to see any type of movement on the case. And immediately, like, she sent over every document and video she had regarding the situation. Thank God for once police departments were, like, communicating with each other. You know how it is. A very rare occurrence. So it was refreshing to see this. So he gets all the information, Detective Ogden. So right away, he orders an autopsy to be done on Jason's body. And when the results came back, I mean, it was shocking. Yes, Jason had drugs in his system, but it was determined he died from asphyxiation caused by strangulation. I'm smiling because asphyxiation is not coming out how I want it to come out. Asphyxiation caused by strangulation. Yes. Anyways, what I'm getting at is that this was not an overdose. Okay. Nope. This was a homicide. So with that in mind, Detective Ogden, he officially ruled Jason's death a homicide. So after all this, Detective Ogden, he brings Kelly in for questioning. Now, I'm going to be honest here. This would be the first of many interviews. There's so much footage of her being questioned. In the end, it was said they had over 100 hours of questioning. She liked to talk, but only with this Detective Ogden guy, because she wouldn't talk like this with Chief Frizzo. Anywho, so Detective Ogden, he told Kelly, like, hey, I just want to talk to you about your husband's death, But during questioning, she stayed in control. She was playing games. She was giving dodgy answers. She was saying, like, a lot, but nothing at all. Do you know what I'm saying? In some of the interviews, she's like, oh, I like observing people. I like studying people. I like to manipulate people. Like, thinks she's smarter than everybody else. And it's really annoying to watch. I watched too much of it. I was just like, shut the fuck up. God, she wouldn't shut up. But the two, like Kelly and Detective Ogden, they kind of built like a strange rapport, you could say. Yeah. Kelly seemed to like him and was always willing to meet up and talk. And Detective Ogden, he would meet her anywhere. Diners, fast food joints, and he was like always wired with an undercover camera, just hoping that she'd slip and confess. But every single time, Kelly like danced around the one thing that he really wanted to know. So Detective Ogden, his first move was to call Jason's friend, Walt, the same guy who like tipped off, who told FBI. Yeah. So Detective Ogden goes to Walt and he's like, hey, will you like help me out with this like plan? So the plan was simple. Walt would call Kelly and pretend that he had received a letter from Jason that was written before his death and like sent to him. And this is all being recorded. So Walt gets Kelly on the phone and he tells her like, hey, I received a letter from Jason that said, if something happens to me, like, please send this sealed note to the Iron River Police Department. And on the other end of the line, Kelly, she's kind of quiet for a minute. She doesn't say anything. And then finally, in like a low voice, she's like, please don't. Now, this was something, but still, Detective Ogden, it wasn't enough. He wanted to mess with Kelly a little bit more. And I kind of love him for it because... yeah, let me tell you. Let me just tell you. So, Detective Ogden, he had been like following Kelly and like watching her low key for a while. And he noticed she had the same routine every night. Same time, same park. She would go sit on like the same log next to the same tree and just sit there. Maybe she was contemplating life or something, I don't know, but she would just sit there every night. So Detective Ogden came up with a little creepy idea. So he ended up carving into the tree that she would sit by the words, "Chris is here." The idea was like to spook her, maybe think this message was coming from like beyond the grave or like from a ghost or something. It's kind of silly, but he did it, and he's hoping, like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. Maybe it'll get her to talk. It's kind of Scooby-Doo-ish, but I like it. I'm like, okay. He did his little carving, and then that night he parked nearby and he waited to see her reaction. And sure enough, Kelly, she showed up. She sat down on her log and she spotted the carving. And I guess right after that, she bolted and she ran straight to her car, got in, sped off. And guess what? It worked, because that same night, March 29th, 2016, Kelly finally cracked. The good old Scooby-Doo carving in the tree really got her. So she called up Detective Ogden and said, I'm ready to talk about what really happened. And they ended up meeting at the station. So Kelly came into the station to meet with Detective Ogden. And finally, she gave a confession. Kind of. She came in and she painted herself as the victim, saying Jason was abusive and controlling and that she was, just trapped in all of this. And I'm kind of saying that sarcastically because you'll see, but like as time goes on, she's just a liar. This woman is a liar and I don't believe her. But that's what she tells them, okay? Kelly said, that night, Chris had come over to her place and Jason shot him right in front of her.
Start from the beginning. He comes in the house. What happens?
Foreplay.
Okay. Then what?
Sex.
Okay. Then what?
Jason shot Chris.
Then he forced her to help clean up the mess and hide the evidence. She said Jason even made her use forceps to pull the bullet out of Chris's skull before he, quote, downsized him. So Detective Ogden was like, what does that mean? Downsized? What's that? And Kelly, completely straight face, said, it means we cut him up. Kelly told Detective Ogden, Jason took away the only good thing in her life, And Detective Ogden, he convinced her to show him where and how everything happened. So at 1 a.m., they drove 6 hours to Iron River. I like how determined everyone is to solve this. It's great. So they drive all the way out there. And when they get there, Kelly first led detectives to a spot where she claimed they had dumped Chris's body parts. So the area was searched, but nothing was found. So Detective Ogden tells her, okay, well then take us to your house and walk us through step by step what happened that night. So they go to the house and Kelly's like, fine, here's what happened. So according to Kelly, Jason had forced her to lure Chris over that night. She said that she and Chris ended up having sex on the landing by the back door. I was like, sure, all right, whatever. So they had sex, and where they had sex also happened to be at the top of the basement stairs. So it went stairs to the basement, landing, stairs to the kitchen. So that landing is where they were doing it. She said when they were finished, Chris started heading upstairs towards the kitchen. And that's when Jason came out from the basement and shot him. Kelly said Chris had he fell backwards onto her, and the two of them tumbled all the way down the stairs. So, Detective Ogden, he's listened to her story, sure, whatever, but he could tell. He said in an interview, he was like, I could tell she's just making this up as she went, So at this point, police are really realizing that Kelly is just a serial liar. Now, the problem was figuring out, what exactly she was lying about. And what was the truth? Because the truth was in there somewhere. But like, was she genuinely confused about the location that she pointed them to? Or was she deliberately like sending them on a stupid wild goose chase? They couldn't tell. But like, at least she's talking. With no hard evidence, they had to send Kelly back to Indiana. And without proof, they couldn't get a warrant for her arrest. Which sounds crazy, right? Because you're like, well, she's confessing, like, this is what happened. But like, according to her confession, she was just there and it was all Jason. So they couldn't arrest her. Meanwhile, investigators, they kept like combing the area around her Iron River home. They would find items that like could be evidence, but the struggle was always the same. There's no DNA, But as time was going on, every so often, Kelly, she would like text Detective Ogden. I know, this bitch. So she's like texting him, and she texts him one day like, hey, ever been to the West Coast? I was driving there last night. And then like she would shut her phone off. Now Detective Ogden, he kept replying to her anyways, knowing that like Kelly could not resist checking to see if he texted her back. Like it was just another one of her dumb little games. Sure enough, she turns her phone back on and she checks her text messages. But what she didn't realize was that every time she turned her phone back on, it pinged a cell tower. So it gave away her location. Now, she was trying to make everyone think she was out like on the West Coast. But she wasn't, of course. Just trying to throw them off. She was actually in Wingo, Kentucky. I guess she was there like hiding out at her cousin's house. Wingo, Kentucky. Now listen, she really messed up with this whole text game because fleeing the state and taunting the detective implied suspicion of guilt. And this was enough for police to finally get a warrant for her arrest. Finally. So just a few days later, on April 29th, 2016, U.S. Marshals had arrested Kelly Cochran in Wingo, Kentucky, and sent her ass back to Michigan. So Kelly, she was formally charged with 5 counts: first-degree murder as an aider and abettor, conspiracy to mutilate a dead body, concealing the death of an individual, larceny in a building, and lying to a peace officer during a violent crime. So these charges were all tied to Chris's death. Now Jason, his death had to be handled separately since it happened in a different state. Now you're probably wondering or thinking to yourself, larceny? Where the hell did that come from? Larceny? What? Turns out after Chris was killed, Kelly had like broke into his apartment to grab her wedding ring, like she left it there, and then she also stole his camera. And I was like, why? Well, according to Kelly, the camera, it had some like raunchy photos and videos on it, and I guess she didn't want anyone to see it. But remember when police first went to Chris's apartment and Terry O'Donnell was like, it's a hot mess? Well, that's why it looked like a hot mess, because Kelly's ass broke in. Kelly was like sitting in jail, waiting for trial to happen. And Detective Ogden, he kept visiting her, trying to pull anything from her, more details, anything, just keep her talking. Because remember, at this point, technically, police still had like no physical evidence. There was no body. There was just like a kind of confession. Okay, but listen. During one of those interviews, Kelly shared new information. Well, she shared a lot, but something interesting came out. She told Detective Ogden that on the night of her wedding, she and Jason made a pact, a deal, an agreement. Now, according to her, she said the deal was if either one of them cheated, they had to kill their side piece. So if Jason cheated, he had to kill his mistress. If Kelly cheated, she had to kill her mantress. Yeah, I was like, was that part of like their vows or something? But okay. Okay. So listen, this is the first time that Kelly was finally admitting that she knew in advance that Jason was going to kill Chris that night because of this pact. Didn't I just say though that like she would have to kill whatever? Eventually Kelly dropped the games and she told Chief Frizzo that she wanted to do the right thing. So she agreed to take them to where Chris's remains were buried. So Kelly takes them like out to this wooded area, and it's funny, but it's not funny. But like while, police are searching, Kelly is like, hey, can I get like a smoke? Can I get a cigarette? Can I get a smoke? Can I get a light? Like, whatever. And then she asked them like, hey, can someone get me a cheese pizza and like a soda? I would love that. While they're looking for like the remains, she's like, can I get a cheese pizza? Yeah, just cheese. And you're like, girl, read the room, Jesus. With the help of a cadaver dog, investigators uncovered a buried skull, later confirmed to be Chris Regan's. Now, it was the break in the case they desperately needed. So from that location, they brought Kelly back to her old Iron River home, which had been left untouched since she and Jason left a year earlier. So it's like everything is still like how it was left. And in the police footage, you can literally see her, cheese pizza in hand, like pointing out where they dismembered Chris's body. She's like, yeah, it happened there. This is like the pizza. She's like, yeah, this is where we come up. Then they find the forceps that she used to dig out like the bullet from Chris's skull. They were still sitting in the kitchen sink. She's like eating her pizza. Oh yeah, that's it. That's what I used to pull it out. It's right there. It's just like, yeah, girl. But also so frustrating because if police would have like, when they initially did that warrant and like took stuff from the house, if they would have taken like these tools from the kitchen, it would have had the DNA on it. It was like they were so freaking close. Anyways, at least they were getting answers. And then Kelly shows them like where they hid the gun, or like hid part of the gun that Jason had used to shoot him. So it was like finally, like everything is like coming together. So even after confessing, Kelly pled not guilty to all 5 charges. Her trial, it actually started on February 14, 2017. So Valentine's Day. Kind of ironic, It's like rain on your winter. Because, it's a trial about killing her lover. It starts on Valentine's Day. Come on, that's kind of ironic. Anyways, so the trial starts. It lasted like 3 weeks. Now, Kelly's defense team argued, like it was all Jason, that she was just a victim. They even leaned into the idea that Kelly was such a liar and a drug addict that like nothing she said could be trusted. They're like, she's a liar. She's a liar. Her story changes constantly. So how do you even know what's real? They just leaned into that. She lies.
I think it's very apparent that throughout the course of these proceedings, my client has been less than truthful. Not gonna sugarcoat it. She's a liar.
And I was like, okay, that was an interesting approach, The prosecution, though, they focused on, well, first of all, the hundreds of hours of questioning, but also like the whole marriage pact of it all, They had her on tape admitting that she knew like what would happen to Chris that night, proving that she wasn't just an innocent bystander in all of this. She was a willing participant. So Kelly, she actually ended up taking the stand, herself. Oh, I was like, this isn't going to go well. She told the court that Jason was abusive, he was jealous and controlling, but that she never told anyone about it until after the murder. So people were like, Was she lying about? I don't know. No one really believed her about him being abusive, but that's what she was claiming. Now, at one point, she tells the court straight up that everything she said she lied about. Like, everything was a lie. Her story kept changing. She's like, yeah, I lied about everything. She said there was no pact with her husband. She said she made that up. It never existed. And she claimed that she had no idea Jason was going to kill Chris that night. Well, you know, again, after like 3 weeks, the jury, they go for deliberations, and they're only gone for like 3 hours. And, you know, they didn't buy anything that Kelly said, because they came back and they found 35-year-old Kelly Cochran guilty on all charges. Now, she was sentenced to life without parole. Now, it was said in court, well, you can see the footage too, but like in court, she just like had nothing. She had no emotion, nothing. She didn't care. Well, what about Jason? You know, I was like, what about Jason? 11 months later, in May of 2018, Kelly pled guilty to the murder of her husband, Jason, and she was sentenced to 65 more years in prison. In exchange, she got a deal guaranteeing she could never be charged with any other murders in the state of Indiana. I was like, okay. Now you think it's over, but it's not over. Because after Kelly's sentencing, even more disturbing allegations started to surface. Her own brother, his name's Connor, listen, he reached out to Detective Ogden with his suspicions that Kelly hadn't just like stopped at Jason and Chris. Now, according to Connor, Kelly once told him there were more victims. 9 in total. He said she and Jason would like make these little comments about killing people, but at the time, everyone brushed it off as like, oh my God, they're just like dark humor. But obviously looking back now, it wasn't so funny. Yeah, so he believed there were more people. Now, while in prison, you know, Kelly's mom had called to talk to her. And you know, it's recorded. Her mom calls her and is like, Kelly, what the hell is going on? Like, where the hell is all this coming from? And Kelly responded, telling her, like, you didn't see this coming? Her mom's response made me giggle just a little. Because she was like, well, yeah, after all this, I could see it coming. But still, it was just funny. Because most people were like, I never saw it coming. And her mom was like, yeah, I could see it coming. But still. So then her mom goes on to say, like, but I didn't know that, like, you guys had, like, killed people before. Do you guys even have, like, a conscience? And have you always been like this? And Kelly responded, I've always been like this, Mom. And it was like, I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting call. She said a lot, again, without saying really anything. Chief Frizzo, she later admitted that she believed there were more victims. Why? Because when it came to Chris Regan's case, it was just too clean. Like, if Kelly hadn't cracked, they might have never actually solved it. Again, like, there was no solid evidence without her confession and, like, leading them to where his remains were found. And to Chief Frizzo, that kind of precision didn't feel like a first-timer kind of situation. But, you know, there's, like, no proof or anything. So it's just beliefs. Then came another disturbing allegation. This one from the neighbors. So remember the same neighbors who said that they heard Jason and Kelly like running power tools late into the night? Yeah, them. So listen, okay. They said that just 2 days after like all that noise, the construction and all that, the Cochrans, they had invited them over for a little like backyard barbecue. So the neighbors agreed, you know, like sure. And when they showed up, according to them, they were kind of shocked because they said there was like $150 to $200 worth of meat piled up. Just like way more than you'd expect for a little cookout, you know? So they were like, oh wow, okay. So, you know, they ate it. And later they shared that like the meat tasted off. Like it was extra chewy. Well, according to the neighbor, he said it was kind of see-through, like lobster meat. You know how it's kind of like see-through? He was like, it looked like that. And he was just horrified. I watched the interview of him and you could just see it in his face of just, he was disturbed. You know, afterwards, the neighbors truly believed that Kelly and Jason chopped Chris up and like served him at the barbecue. After this realization, they were messed up. I'm sure they're probably still messed up. According to Chief Rizzo, none of this like ever made it into the official investigation because there was no proof. There was no evidence that they consumed Chris's remains. You know what I'm saying? And that the neighbors came to that conclusion on their own. But still, I don't know. Listen, in 2019, Kelly Cochran, she filed an appeal and she lost. And to this day, she's still behind bars at the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Now, I was thinking to myself, I don't know if you were thinking this, I know you weren't, but I was. And I was like, Huron Valley Correctional Facility. That sounds very familiar. Why does that sound familiar? And you know what? You know who else is at this prison? Murder Mystery Deep Cut. Cherie Miller. Do you remember her? No. Let me tell you. I did a murder mystery episode on her. It was titled Catfish Gone Wrong. She was like one of the first internet catfish. Cherie was married and like had online relationships. And then like she and her internet lover planned to like murder her husband. It was a whole thing. It was a wild story. Anyways, she's at that prison too. That's all. I was just like, I wonder if they've crossed paths at all. I just, you know, when murder mysteries cross over, I'm always like, wow, it sure is a small world. Unfortunately, not everyone got a happy ending. Chief Laura Frizzo, love her. She put everything into this case. She was dedicated. She was a big player in all of this, okay? In the end, she ended up getting fired from her position. Yes. I was like, for what? I don't know. It's not very clear, okay? Now, afterwards, she filed like a wrongful termination suit, but she ended up losing. And to this day, the exact reason as to why she was fired isn't clear. But Chief Rizzo, she believes her boss just didn't like all the attention she was getting in regards to this case. Didn't like that she was a woman in charge. And yeah, that. It was sad. It's like, what the? Shouldn't you be proud that she got the job done? Jeez. But listen, because there was one unexpected silver lining. While working this investigation, Chief Laura Frizzo and Detective Jeremy Ogden, they grew close and they eventually fell in love. Yeah, the two ended up dating and then they ended up getting married. I was like, aw, it's actually really cute. It's dark. You know, when people ask you, like, how'd you guys meet? That's a story for them. But, like, yeah, I was like, oh, okay, cute. Cute. Okay. Sad story. Cute. A murder mystery love story. You just don't hear about that often, huh? Listen, Kelly Cochran is one of those cases where the deeper you go, the less sense it makes. The marriage pacts, the possible multiple victims, neighbors who think they were fed human barbecue. It's just one big, like, what the fuck? And I feel like I barely scratched the surface because when you watch even the police interview footage with her, she is something else. She is something, okay? The way she changed her stories, the way she thought she was playing, like, games. Exhausting. I don't think we'll ever really know the full truth. And then the thought, like, that there might be more, you know? It's just like, what the fuck? Or maybe, I was thinking, maybe she's just one of those, like, compulsive liars who makes stuff up for attention. But I don't know. I don't know. She's exhausting. I'll say that. And I was thinking, I was like, I mean, if this is what we do know about Kelly, I can't imagine what we don't know about her. And then at the end of the day, poor Chris Regan, like, lost his life because of this stupid woman and her husband. And between like Kelly's lies, Jason's violence, and like all the games they played, it just feels like Chris was caught in the middle of just something he never stood a chance against. And like and to lose her, just sad. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. You make good choices. Please be safe out there. And let me know what you think in the comment section down below, who you want me to talk about next time. But other than that, have a good day, and I will be seeing you guys later. Goodbye. Oh, go watch that catfish murder mystery I did. I'll link that down below because that one's crazy too, okay? Goodbye.